Europe, in America, and in Australia, and they have one right here. That whole bunch. The parties with the singing and the flute and the chanting, those are espas or Sabbaths or whatever
don't get
they're called.
excited, huh?
Read what they do, Guy. They use blood in their rituals, and the blood that has the most power is baby's blood.
Hi, everybody. My name is Levi Rowland. This is Brian Cain. We are both high priests of the Alexandrian tradition of witchcraft, and this is Covendom. Covendom is a series that we thought up and that we broadcast both through Facebook Live and our YouTube channel, Hex Education. Please like and subscribe if you're there. There's also interviews from the Coven and lots of other interesting videos available there. Today is
This is season 2, episode 4.
Episode 4, right, of our second season. And our topic for the day is superstition and witchcraft, right? Where do we draw lines? What does that mean? We're going to talk about a lot of things today.
One thing we should mention, I forgot, is our special guest wasn't able to show. She got sick. So Christine Stevens will be joining us another time.
Yes, absolutely. So my show is going to be part of the tarot pull for the day. We always pull a tarot card at the beginning of every show. But I got tired of that, and I went through all my decks, and I picked out a oracle deck, a Sybil deck. Versions of these are incredibly popular in Europe. European cartomancy has its own style. It's much more similar to playing cards, but some of them are very unique. They have long histories in France and Germany, and there's 1,000 versions of them, and you sort of just build a relationship with one and deal with it as you may. So we're going to pull from one of those today, instead of the traditional 78 Western tarot. So, today's card is the Lover, right? L'amante, the Lover. This particular image is of a woman underneath a tree. She is associated with the 12 of clubs in this particular deck, wearing the clothing of someone betrothed, right? So a good time to make commitments. Valentine's Day is coming up.
Looks like a bit like Snow White.
Yeah, a little Snow White.
And I curse Valentine's Day and everything it stands for because I've had some of the most unlucky Valentine's days.
Not your holiday?
Ever.
Not his holiday, guys.
Did
Don't send him roses.
Now, roses, I usually do get roses from Christian's never been too much of a problem as far as Valentine's Day is concerned.
Problem.
But I've had bad luck with lovers on Valentine's Day, like more than once.
Not your favorite.
No.
Well, that leads us perfectly into what we're talking about today, which is superstitions, right? But before we get too into it, did you have a show you wanted to share?
So I was trying to think of, I was kind of being laying with my show and tell today because I was like, I kind of woke up tired, so my mind was everywhere. So I was going to show you the newest little ditty I got here, which is a golden Baphomet ring. I really like this ring. You can find it a lot of times in silver designs, but Baphomet is I love the symbol of Baphomet. I think it's derived from Ephes Levi. You could basically find it in tarot cards nowadays.
Yep, as the devil. Mm-hmm.
We're all used to it. The Church of Satan adapted it for Satan and all that sort of thing too. But originally it had nothing to do with the devil. It was an occult symbol, who could theorize what it means, but as a witchcraft symbol, it really does sort of tie it all together. It's got the elements, it has the torch of knowledge, it has the horned god, it has the breasts of the goddess, it has the wings of Isis. There's so many symbols. If you ever want to, the catechist is in there, the serpents and all that. So there's so many different symbols.
Alchemy, salt,
above, so below. It's just a very powerful symbol, and it's been used in Alexandrian witchcraft the entire time. So it's actually a part of our tradition in a way. You famously know of Maxine wearing the Baphomet mask. So that's why it's just a fun sort of fashion thingy. I think it makes me look like a 70s occult Satanist.
I mean, I feel like you need it to be, and I'm going to let you have that.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. It's respect. Blessed be one of our watchers. Yes, we have. And we are all. First of all, as we always say, please feel free to ask questions throughout the show. We love to answer your questions. You can ask through Facebook chat. You can ask through YouTube, which we finally have back online this time. Already seeing our comments. Hi, Kevin. Hi,
Apparently,
Morgan.
if you say it's okay for kids on YouTube, they won't let you have comments.
Yeah, we're not appropriate for the children.
Oh, I think we were, so that's why I said I thought it was okay. I don't think we ever say anything that's not appropriate.
I'm joking, Brian.
I mean, obviously it's not, a thing for children anyway, but it's not like we're swearing or talking blatantly about sex most of the time.
Frequently. Organized devil worship.
So,
but yes, good evening to everyone. So glad we're seeing all your comments come through.
not anything the kids wouldn't get on Nickelodeon.
Yes. So I thought we would start out and sort of lay down what we want to hit on in this show. And we've been talking a lot about this personally in the Coven, and just Brian and I as priests, this concept of superstition. You know, we claim to be a religion that believes in magic. We practice magic. We practice divination. A lot of us do. We claim to believe in the gods. You know, in the modern secular world, all of these would be called superstitious. By anyone outside of the faith, regardless of what faith you're talking about, it's all superstition. But I want to start out just giving a tiny bit of background on what the word superstitious means. Historically, we get the word superstition from where we get a lot of things in the Western world, the Romans, right? The Romans, yay Rome, viva Rome. So, Città Eterna. So Roman religion was very state-oriented, right? It was all about the functioning of the state. You had the College of Pontifices, you had a system, you had, you know, an expectation that if good religion was served, then the gods would bless the state or help us win wars or whatever. And this was called religio, right? Religion. And you also had something that came to be called superstitio, superstition, which was when it went too far. And the Romans would often apply this label to practices that they thought were harmful to social cohesion or to the person who was practicing themselves. So this was extreme forms of witchcraft and magic, extreme forms of religious penance, religion that cut people out from society, that made them eunuchs, such as the cult of Magna Mater, you know, sometimes praised, sometimes benign, depending on the emperor. So the word superstitious came to mean an almost paranoia-driven belief, that your belief wasn't about power, it wasn't about the gods, it wasn't about becoming a better person for the state or for yourself. Yeah. It was based in fear. Fear of a big boogeyman in the sky or under the mountain or whatever who was going to come kill you if you didn't do the right sort of thing. And over time, superstition
like Christianity.
Big fan, right? Superstition came to be over time basically those practices that you really had no explanation for. You just did them out of fear of not doing them. And so that's sort of the history of superstition. And now we could talk a little bit more about what we think that has to do with witchcraft, but did you want to intro anything else into that?
Well, yeah, my topic for the show, it's very similar to what Levi just said. Superstition, or the study of superstitions, can be a fascinating gateway into folklore. But inherently, as initiates, you know, we're taught not to be superstitious, meaning we're not looking for the boogeyman, you know, and we're trying to break through some of those delusions. I think one of the most difficult things about being an initiate in a place like New Orleans is that this city is ripe with superstition, and it's promoted very much as a part of the culture and a part of people's belief systems.
Or sometimes just tourism.
Yeah. Money. You know, and it can be fun. I'm not saying it's all, you know, we're not here to poo-poo on the whole thing. It's got its positives and negatives, but, you know, we're going to discuss that a little bit. But I think that superstition is, you know, as Levi just articulated, it's that sort of fear-based thing. I have to do this or something bad's going to happen.
Chain letters.
Or if I do this, something bad's going to happen. It's uninvolved spirituality, meaning that there's a system in place that is just established, and your participation is only required by sticking to a certain set of rules.
It's like the mob.
You know,
protection money.
You know, if you spill salt, you must throw it over your shoulder. I mean, that's a really well-known superstition, and I probably do it, you know, but we'll get to that later. I'm not saying that we don't have any superstitions, but I'm also not really involved in superstitions too much. You know, I do have mine. I think you said you had a game you wanted to play.
Yes, I thought what we could do is name a couple of superstitions that we might have seen our family engage in, and I'm hoping some of the people in our chat can throw some forward too that we might forget, or that your family, you know, sort of practiced or kept alive, and we could say whether or not we do it, maybe talk about where it comes from or whatever, and why we keep it up if we do. So the first one, let's start simple. Do you throw salt over your shoulder if you spill it?
Yes.
I do too.
I just do because I've always done it since I was a kid.
My mother did it and still does it religiously.
You know, I don't know, you know, once you've established something that much into your mind, it does then sort of have some sort of power over you, which is the whole point. Obviously, we've all heard of
I knock on wood.
I knock on wood. Yes, I knock on wood.
I knock on wood all the time.
It's a superstition, though. It does come from trees and spirits of trees and things like that.
Yeah. Like I'm praying to the god in the tree.
Yeah. Right? But yeah, I think those are easy and they're so ingrained in our culture.
Yep.
I mean, people do them whether they take them seriously. It's like you don't walk under a
ladder.
Yes, I don't tend to walk under ladders.
I tend to avoid it too.
Because it's been there since childhood. I don't even know where it came from. I think those ones are pretty universal. But how
black cats are being mentioned?
I don't follow that one.
No, because I love black cats.
I've never followed that one. But yes, it is. In some places in Ireland, it was white cats. But that one never. Because I was a cat lover very early on, I never. Even though I'm known for having small dogs, I used to always have kittens as a child. And I had a black cat actually for 19 years. Because I love them so much, I couldn't ever perceive them that way.
That's bad luck, yeah.
And so I just never bought into that one. And that superstition has brought a lot of cruelty into
black cats, which I hate too.
So most humane societies will not sell cats around Halloween because of the superstitions surrounding them.
Yep. Yeah. There's a really good one here. Shiloh brought up an itchy palm. That means that money is coming.
I do that one.
I do that too.
But you cannot control when your palm's itching. But yes,
I do.
I didn't know I had this many
when
superstitions.
When I have the itchy palms, I think money's coming. Yep.
Yes.
Or if your ears are burning, people are talking about
ringing or burning.
Yeah.
I do all these things, and I'm superstitious.
But these are fun superstitions.
They're ingrained in our society.
I don't want to go too much into it because I do think it's kind of boring, but if you are interested, you can look up the history of why some of these started. Like the salt thing was because salt was so precious and rare, and breaking a mirror was the same thing. It was 7 years bad luck simply because mirrors
I avoided that one. Now I sometimes break mirrors on purpose, especially if they have the face of my enemies in them.
Hobbies, people.
Bad luck for whom?
Exactly. Bad luck for whoever's dealing with it. But yeah, there are historical precedents for why these things become. But what I found, I'm so glad we got all of these. So like someone even said that in their tradition, it was if the right palm was itchy, it was money coming in. If it was the left, it was money coming out. Edward brought up the famous red sun in the morning, the sailor take warning.
Oh, I know that
red
one.
sun at light.
That is actually more folklore knowledge. I don't quite classify that as a superstition because there actually is a science behind it. Quite often on nice days, you really do have red skies, and it has something to do with what's going on in the air.
And Kat brought up rowan trees being buried to ward off evil witches and black magic. And there's a long history.
Have you ever heard of not putting shoes on tables?
Yes.
We didn't do that because it meant somebody would die.
The big one for my family, and there are times when I think superstitions, it's just coincidence that make you so latched onto them. There's a big tradition where I'm from that if a bird flies into the house, somebody in the family will die. And
Levi and Lucille Ball have some things in common.
It was just a big thing in my family. It was a big thing in my family. And the two relatives, three actually, that I've lost, there was a bird in the house before. So, I mean, it was one of those things that it's locked into my mind now, whether it's coincidence or not.
I remember we talked about this.
Yeah, it was too specific.
Yeah. Lucille Ball was terrified of birds from that same superstition.
It's a superstition.
And when her father died, I guess a bird had flown into the house. Yep. So she was so afraid of them. Images of birds. No go. Like a huge phobia.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there's all kinds of fun ones, lucky pennies.
Sweeping the feet. I've heard if you
under
your
the
feet sweeped, you'll go to jail.
I've heard, see where I'm from, if somebody sweeps under your feet and you're not married, it means you'll never be married. You'll never be married.
Too late.
And then we also, where I'm from, I don't know if anybody in the comments had this where you're from too, so please tell me, when you moved, you were not allowed to take your broom with you. The broom that you used, it would sweep away your life.
I've heard you buy a new broom.
You always buy a new broom in a new home. You do not take the old broom with you. So there are lots of reasons where these superstitions come from, but they're fun.
The lucky rabbit's foot, which is another horrible
one that led to animal cruelty.
It's kind of a talisman in a way.
Yep.
See what else?
4-leaf clovers.
That's good luck, yeah.
Good luck.
I do have one of those somewhere.
And if I find one, I pick them. Yep.
What else? So many. You don't think about how many there are.
There's so many of them.
Because we didn't pre-plan it.
The sweeping under the feet when I grew up was a huge one. My grandmother and my aunts and whatnot, they would never, ever.
My grandmother thought burning bread was bad luck.
Yep.
I didn't adopt it.
If you burnt bread, it meant bad luck for the house. Yep.
Which goes back to it being related to the harvest.
Exactly.
And what happens if the wheat is burned? It means you're having a drought.
Yeah, 100%.
you know.
But there's so many fun ones too, just weird little superstitions that people have. Like some people where I'm from, you must exit the house through the door that you entered into. And then a really big one where I'm from is whoever opens a knife must be the one to close it.
I wonder if that's where you get Laurie Cabot saying, where witches enter in from there they must withdraw.
Where I'm from, that's a big thing. You exit.
Every ending is the beginning.
You were invited through.
Where they enter in from there they must withdraw. That's a real. She used to say that on her radio show.
That's a
years
very
ago.
famous superstition.
Yeah.
And another big one where I'm from was the knife thing that I just said. If somebody opened a pocket knife or something and handed it to you, no matter what, they had to be the one to close it. You know.
I think it was for our wedding anniversary, our friend Sen Moise bought us a set of knives, and he made me give him a coin for them.
Oh, they can't be free.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they'll be weapons.
And he was real insistent about it. You know, you have to give me a coin. Doesn't matter if it's a penny.
Yeah. So what I think is really cool, and we'll come back to these because we're getting so many in the comments, and I love
good.
this.
I want to hear some of them.
Some of them are a blowfly outside means visitors. Don't lift your feet over a railroad track. Making a wish with an eyelash. You know, holding the eyelash. And we didn't talk about like wishbones, cracking the wishbones.
Oh yes.
And the no shoes on the table. Somebody brought up. They said they're in their version. It starts an argument.
Oh.
Shoes on the table mean an argument.
I was told it meant someone's going to die.
Yeah. Someone was about to mention the knife. At least a penny for a knife. I've heard this too, that you can't give a weapon, something with a blade, for free.
Now here's where we become a little bit unpolite. None of this has anything to do with witchcraft.
Yes, exactly. This is just, folklore.
You know, it really doesn't. You know, it is, folklore does have a window into witchcraft, but superstition or these sort of mythological, they are kind of magical in a way, especially if you empower them.
Yeah.
And as we've already admitted, we do have our own little traditions. You know, I said it in the last show, the Irish have a saying that I have adopted, never make or break a tradition.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of in that place now where, like, if I already have the superstition, I realize I'm sort of stuck with it. Mm-hmm. Like, I do leave the fairies offerings, and I don't talk much about fairies, but my very first teacher and the work that I did was very Celtic and fairy oriented, very fairy oriented. And so that really was a part of everything that we did. And so I've had that sort of idea built up in my mind that if I forget after a time to leave an offering, I sometimes get a bout of bad luck. This is in the realm of superstition.
Of course.
But it's something that I've brought up in my mind.
And you've empowered and made your own.
So, so you're sort of stuck with it, I think, in a way.
Absolutely.
Obviously, you can break free from it. And if it's dangerous or insane, I would say break free from it. But the Irish proverb, never make or break a tradition, is like, you don't really need these things, but why chance your luck?
Yes.
Once you've gotten involved.
I wanted to start with this more fun, lighthearted kind of way of dealing with it, because I think what Brian and I are going to get into here tonight is...
You know I want to say it, don't you?
No.
Go ahead.
What I think we're going to get into tonight is where we think superstition and craft diverge. And and it's not just craft. I actually want to go larger than that.
The occult.
The occult in general. There are so many examples
religion.
Where a strong practice was overcome by superstition to its detriment. And I'm going to list a few major examples. Many of you know the community of mediums that exist in New York called Lilydale. It's famous. It's one of the most famous places for spiritual work in the world. You know, Buckland went there for a long time. This is where some of the greatest mediums in America, the Fox sisters and everything else, were associated with it. Lilydale went through a phase, and all of mediumship went through a phase for a short period of time where they were obsessed with what was called physical mediumship. This meant that it wasn't just about holding hands, channeling somebody, speaking for the dead. It was the trumpet on the table's going to magically play, or the slates are going to write themselves and whatnot. It was all fraudulent, like top to bottom. They got debunked mercilessly. It created horrible damage for the spiritualist community. And finally, Lilydale banned it. You cannot do physical mediumship at Lilydale anymore. You must do channeling, traditional channeling.
No more spitting loogies into the air.
No more astral, gauze coming out of the mouth and whatnot, which turned out to just be literal gauze dripping in goo. superstition will infect a community, and when it does, what it produces is a couple of things: fear, money grubbing, and charlatanism. You know, and so those three things are just the seeds of excess superstition. So this is when superstition goes ugly in the occult world. And, you know, I think spiritual mediumship is a perfect example of how that could go haywire. And I think in witchcraft lately, I've noticed something in social media that is alarming to me as a craft practitioner and a craft teacher, is a lot of people are starting to talk about their craft in a way that I find less about power and more about superstition, where it becomes, this random spirit from a dream state told me I had to do X, I must do X, that's all that matters. There's no attempt to sort of internalize that, think about what that might mean. It's literal ghost worship in a very sort of, you know, dangerous way that I think strips people of their personal power, makes them nervous, feeds off of their paranoia. And I've noticed that lately, and I think that's why I wanted this to be a topic. So like
delusion
becomes God, right?
That does happen. I mean, we are occultists. We've seen things and we believe in things, yes, obviously. However, I think Levi and I both share a healthy amount of skepticism, and there have been times when I've heard occultists say things I'm like, that's not real. Yeah. That's not going to happen. And if you think that's going to happen, then you're either delusional or crazy, which are kind of the same thing, but not necessarily. I think anyone can fall into the realm of delusion.
Easily.
You know, because, you know, fantasy is a part of the human makeup, and sometimes that helps people cope.
It's escapism.
With a life perhaps they don't like, or, you know, they feel disempowered in their life, so it gives them a sense of power. You know, I'm of the mind that power is power. You know, delusion is not power. You know, so yeah, really, quite literally, I take superstition with a grain of salt, even my own. You know, my craft doesn't have anything really to do with superstition. Slightly.
Yeah.
You know, you know, I do believe that there's certain do's and don'ts and things that, you know, that are better for you. I do feel like in my life, when I'm working a lot in craft, things go better my way. And I have found in my life those moments where I wasn't working as much, things start to devolve. But is this a superstition, or is this about me not being in touch at that time, you know, for some reason? Our practices themselves are not superstitious, though. We actually go through the mechanics of what's happening. You know, absolutely, magic can fall under the umbrella term superstition, as you have already said.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, we're talking more about, oh my God, if I don't pour the rum into the coconut shell, or I don't, you know, take the chicken foot over here, and, you know, and there are some people who their entire magical practice is like, oh my God, I must serve my spirits, or I must serve my gods, I must do this thing.
It's very servile.
You know, that's not witchcraft. Witchcraft, I really think, is about co-creation. Like there is deity, but there's a relationship with the deity. You know, there's a cohesive relationship between the initiate and the deity. It's not separate.
No,
you know?
And this is another thing. Superstition to me is religion unhinged from a foundation. So when I talk to people, who engage in some of these practices, and let's just, I'm not picking, it's hard to have this conversation without it sound like I'm picking on people. I'm not.
Let's just get one thing straight about this show, though, because I thought about this today on other subjects. We don't care. Because the reality of the situation is nowadays, the reality of the situation is that nowadays you will offend somebody by saying the truth, no matter what the truth is. So I'm not going to worry too much about that.
I'm not too worried.
And if our one haters out there, thank you. We appreciate your one dislike on every video. Keep watching. Right, back to Levi.
Bo Brian. Oh, Brian. But it's religion unmoored.
And I bet you're fat. Here we go. Sorry, I'm very mischievous today.
Evidently, maybe the fairies need an offering. But when religion is unmoored, or when faith and spirituality or practice or whatever is unmoored from a root system, that's when you breed superstition. Mm-hmm. So I'll talk to my friends who will do things, they'll say things like, well, I have to light a candle to make this spell work. And what I always ask that drives them insane is, why does that work? That's my number one question. Why does that work?
Yeah.
And I use candle magic, first of all, so don't think that I'm some secularist who doesn't believe in it. I'm a priest in a religion that practices magic. But my question is, why? Why does it work? And I get a lot of responses that are very not good, to be honest. It's usually a sort of wishy-washy kind of energy in the air argument, which is the worst pseudoscience you'll ever hear in your life. And God help you if the word quantum mechanics pops up, because they've never read a book on quantum mechanics in their damn life. But they're going to use it somehow to justify what they're doing. And I'm like, what does this have to do with you burning a candle, Debbie? Like, there's no answer. In systems where you're trained, like Alexandrian witchcraft, like, the OTO, like, various esoteric orders from the past, or other, even the spiritualist movement that practices mediumship, there's a system, and they have reasons for why they do what they do. There's a belief behind it. There's a foundation behind it. You actually have a mechanic behind it. If you're just doing it because you actually think that
make a wish
and blow out the candle is going to work, well, that's just superstition. Like, that form of magic.
We forgot about that superstition.
Yeah, that form of magic to me is just pure superstition. Like, I'll ask him, why do you need crystals? Crystals have power. Okay, what does that mean? What do you mean they have power? They're from the earth. Okay, so is fossilized dinosaur poop. Like, so is petroleum. I mean, you're going to have to, help me out here. Well, and now, do I think there are ways you could argue that using crystals actually does have a sort of foundational, powerful effect? Sure. Do they do that? No. And if all you're doing is the magic thing will save me, that's just superstition. There's no self-work going on.
It's no different than saying, if I say these magic words, this will happen.
Yeah.
There are examples of this throughout history, and people did believe that way.
Yeah.
Whether or not their magic worked, we don't know. But a trained occultist today will want more behind it than say the magic words and expect it to happen.
Yeah, you want a little something
there's a
else.
whole process that goes into it. Levi had a great book last week that was having these spells that were like,
Cursed
I
tablets.
lost my beans, please make their arms fall off.
Cursed tablets from Greece and Rome.
It was amazing, but that was how it was. And we're not saying that's not a part of magic history or magic, magic world. We're just saying it's probably an inferior approach.
Yes, and I'm going to address something right away because I knew it'd be a first question we got, and I think it's a great question. Tanya said, well, if it works for someone, then ... Okay. I knew this would be something that came up, but why do we care? If it works, it works. I'm not going to be in agreement with this. Brian can give an opinion here too, but I have a very strong opinion about this. If it works, it works. Lots of things will work in the short term that are actually bad for you. Cigarettes calm my nerves, for example. Does not make them a good habit. They're a horrible habit. So just because something might work in the moment or work because you need it does not mean it is good or good for you. And this whole mentality we have now of let people do whatever they want. Well, yes, of course, I believe in freedom, but I'm also not going to, if somebody comes to me specifically and says, I need to do X, Y, or Z, what do you feel about A, B, C? I'm not just going to lie and say it's all the same. It's not all the same. And think about the kind of mentality you are building through a lot of these superstitious practices. What does it feed off of? Does it feed off your personal power? Does it make you feel closer to the divine? Do you feel like a better human being, a better spouse, lover, friend, whatever? No, it feeds off of paranoia. It feeds off of spite, the obsession with cursing in the modern, blogospheres and whatnot. It feeds off the worst human qualities. And in a world already sort of rife with that, do we really need more of that? Is that what the world is parched for right now? Is spite and paranoia?
I think what you're basically saying is just because it worked doesn't mean it doesn't have consequences. And of course, so using a blanket statement like, well, as long as it works, maybe you got, your new boyfriend by cutting a child's head off,
Is it worth it?
Obviously I know you didn't mean something that extreme, but, sometimes something could work and doesn't make it really the right course of action. However, if you're implying if simple works of magic work for you, I'm betting that there's something else going on
There's power there
inside of you besides just let me take this root and slap it on the table and tell my spirit Mobo Jobo to empower it. I bet you there's something more going on with you if your magic works. And obviously we're not here to teach you the mechanics of how we use magic. If your magic works, If you are performing magic, you've got some kind of mechanic going down if you're getting results. Obviously, we can't measure that. Nobody says their magic doesn't work. Most people's doesn't work. You know, if everyone's magic worked, the world would be a much different place.
Chaotic.
But even a broken clock strikes. You know, how does
twice a day? A broken clock is right twice a day.
But you know, you can boil an egg doesn't make you a 5-star chef. You know, so obviously we don't know your situation. I do believe, for myself, I have done very simple spells that have worked quite effectively, and I've done very elaborate rituals that have worked quite effectively. But there's always this mechanic going on inside of me. There's always a depth to it. You know, it's not just, you know, making a wish.
And this is something that I think we have to touch on that is a little complicated, which is the philosophy behind it, the ideas behind it.
But you were going a little bit into the ethics, correct?
Yes, the ethics. Said that, yeah. And if we look at the philosophy of magic in general, you have sort of a few major groups here, and we belong very much in one category of that group. Alexandrian witchcraft in particular, but I would say the entire Western occult tradition, which is that...
Don't try to put me in a box.
You'll like the box, I promise. But
that's what all my dates say.
Wow. Okay. Well, everybody's got to have a hobby, children, and if, you know, breath play is yours, I'm not here to judge. Be safe. But the thing is a lot of people I see practicing magic right now and talking about it a lot, which is a red flag in the beginning. Most people who are really good magicians are not constantly talking about their works. But there are some people who, historically, let's make it simple. There were a lot of people historically who just believed they lived in a scary, magical universe that they didn't understand. Sort of plebeian magic, right? Peasant magic, folk magic. It doesn't say it doesn't work. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying they didn't have some big philosophical reason.
They didn't have teeth.
No, wow. They had plenty of teeth, Brian.
Some of them still don't.
But they have, they had a concept of just like, it's a big, scary, magical world. There's things that go bump in the night. Maybe if I pray to those things that go bump in the night, or maybe if I rub these things together and hope with all my hope, you know, and it fails, it's on me. And it was basically like the power was not in them. In the Western occult tradition, which is absorbed almost all of its philosophy from Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, Hermetic Kabbalah, which was Christian interpretations of Jewish Kabbalah, and a couple other major sources. And in the East, you have Tantra and Vedanta, you know, in the Advaita Vedanta traditions and stuff like that. It was a much, much different sort of philosophy. The power's always within you. Whatever rocks, whatever circles you're drawing, whatever symbolism you're using, whatever angel names you're invoking in the middle of the night with your weird friends in the graveyard, it's you. It's always you. Mm-hmm. You are the microcosm.
And there's a personal responsibility that comes into things in the ethics of these spiritual movements when it's always you. Witchcraft does have that in common.
Yeah.
Like we really believe we're basically the builders of our own universe. Therefore, we are responsible.
As above.
We create our own heavens and our own hells. You know, so yeah, it's. I think that there is an amount of intellect that is lacking in extreme superstition as well as delusion.
Yeah, it's just
and so
base belief.
We're taught in the craft to fight against that. Mm-hmm. You know, if me throwing salt over my shoulder was like a big thing, I'd be called out on it. You know, if I was like, oh my God, Levi, I didn't throw salt under my shoulder and I can't leave my house for 12 months.
Red flag.
You know,
red flag.
Oh my God, I need an exorcism. I'm going to call Cain, you know, whatever it's going to be. You know, no. You know, no.
It's too much. Too much.
We're too intellectually arrogant to probably usually even discuss our simple superstitions.
Yeah, they're our own personal.
I don't talk about knocking on wood. I just do it as for a fun thing. It's kind of like slug bug or something. You know, I really don't think it's actually a thing.
No.
You know, maybe fairy offerings, because those, I was going to say something, but they're real.
That face. Please let that be the one that becomes the freeze frame for.
I always get an ugly freeze frame. Why does
fate.
It always pick the worst ones? I love it. You get 3 choices and they're always bad.
I love it. One of the ones you picked for me, the book is in front of my face, and I was like,
Trust me, it was the best one.
Mm-hmm. He's saying something about me. It's fine.
No, it was the best
You
one.
always end up getting a weird one. I always end up the way too surprised.
I really only go by what I look like.
I know you do, honey. I know you do. No,
last ones were. There was one I didn't do it because they were just so bad. Yeah.
It's just black.
Now, if you're savvy enough, you can somehow go through and figure it out.
But we're not savvy.
No, we're not.
But that is my biggest point when it comes to superstition versus practice is if you believe that you live in a world, I think you're forfeiting your power. Like if it's all about,
Christianity,
you're forfeiting your power.
If you break the laws, you're going to go to hell.
You're forfeiting your power.
That's a superstitious belief. In the craft, we really don't have a really structured belief about what happens when we die. We teach reincarnation, and we teach that there are other worlds, and we teach that spirits can inhabit this plane for whatever reason. So we basically teach that it's all real, primarily focused on reincarnation, but there's no structured, it's not the reincarnation of the Buddhist or the Hindu. There's no structured system to it. So it's sort of left open because we know beyond these glimpses that human beings have had, nobody really knows, and there seems to be some truth behind all of it, and I think that there is, but we don't live a superstitious belief system. We do not believe that we're going to be thrown into witchcraft hell because we've offended the goddess.
No.
It's not. No.
No, and I think that,
you evolve or devolve in this life and in wherever you're going based on what you've done with it.
And it's because, I think very heavily, we don't want to lose that sense of we're working on the soul. This is theurgy. Part of what we do is theurgy.
We want to see God. We want to be God.
And this is something also that I'll say that is not just about the Western occult tradition or witchcraft or anything else. This is found in every major world religion. In Eastern Orthodox Christianity, for example, their concept of salvation is called theosis in Greek, literally becoming God. And in the New Testament, St. Paul says, the most conservative Christian writer says, do you not know it is written, ye shall be as God? I mean, this is something that exists all throughout religious traditions, this idea of coming to the divine, being one with the divine. In Hinduism, it's, in Advaita Vedanta, at least in Hinduism, it's trying to realize that the Atman, which is the individual soul, and the Brahman, which is the world soul, are the same thing.
If you die tomorrow and realize this is all a dream, then you'll know God. That's kind of a philosophy. Superstition, and witchcraft. Let's think about this. What do we think in the craft could constitute superstition? If we were going to really think about it, we do have some folklore.
Yeah. Taboos. We have taboos.
We've got some taboos, some folklore. Something extreme I can really think of. Some people don't like to put the chalice upside down.
Yeah, things like that. Right?
Because it's seen as disrespectful. But there's no actual punishment for doing it.
No, but I love that. That he brought this example up because let me tell you something. Mindfulness and consciousness are the keys that separate a meaningful practice from a superstition. So every Catholic in the world, when they walk into a Catholic church, dips their fingers in a font of holy water and crosses themselves.
You threw some at me when we were
I did.
I've never gotten over it.
I know.
I got mad.
So he got very mad. But dips his or her fingers into the font and crosses themselves. Now, somebody who does this mindlessly and who believes that's magic water, that's a superstition. But if you know anything about Catholicism, that is there for a reason. To enter into that space, dip your fingers into that water and cross yourself is to remind yourself that you're baptized. It is literal a re-examination of your own baptism, your own entry into the tradition. When you genuflect in a Catholic church before you sit down, for somebody who's doing it mindlessly, that's a superstition. Gotta kneel in church. For somebody who knows the Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation, that God is physically and really present in the host, they are literally acknowledging they're in the presence of God. So you see the difference. It's the mindlessness that makes it a superstition. Consciousness is what makes it a practice.
Yes. We don't, like the chalice example, giving you a big craft secret here. There's no punishment for it. I think it's just been established as a sign of respect.
Yeah.
That you don't treat it like a normal cup and turn it over.
It's to make you mindful.
But there's nothing that says, if you do that, then this bad thing's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
You just don't. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, that could be considered ritual etiquette.
It could be, which can also, but again, without consciousness, that's just
that becomes superstition. Especially if you feel like something bad's going to happen.
Yeah, it's the consciousness that divides that line.
What else is there, sir? I don't really think there are too many strong superstitions. I mean, there's these beliefs like you hear about, like if a witch, if it ever comes a time where no witch is properly performing the Sabbath rites, then the seasons will come out of whack and it'll be the end of the earth.
Yeah.
I don't know where that story came from, but I've heard it in more than one place. It's probably a modern myth, but it is a myth. So that's one. Just to get people to show up to Coven. If you don't show up, it's all going to die.
Show up, the world will end.
Yes. Oh God, I don't know. I don't think there's.
We just don't engage in a lot because every single thing.
It's not because it's.
We engage in. We have a mindful, conscious reason for.
Yeah. You know, the worship is conscious. The magic is conscious. The way we do magic is conscious. You know.
And a lot of this stems from the fact, and this is something I do want to bring in that people might not like, but I think is important. Our traditions have pulled from a lot of resources. As Maxine says, we're a scavenger religion. And if you look at the books that a lot of our craft elders were reading and pulling from, a lot of them are from the Theosophists and the Anthroposophists, like Rudolf Steiner and whatnot.
These were intellectuals.
Yes, and they also were heavily influenced later by Jung and stuff like that. Vivian Crowley, for example, her entire system is very Jungian. She's a Jungian psychoanalyst, and there are lots of people who pulled from Joseph Campbell. And
Big one.
A lot of people pulled from him, and from Robert Graves, and from, Robert Graves was massively influential on our craft elders, and so was Fraser and the Golden Bough, and what all of these sort of...
That was society as a whole at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what all of these strains had in common was this idea that the myths are true, even if they're not factual. The myths are true. They are true within us. We make them true. We imbibe them as truth, but we live them as truth. And this is different than a lot of other spiritual practices in the world, which need the literal truth. They can't accept mythological truth. It must be literally true, right? Like the ancestors must literally be there.
That you sort of taught me.
What?
No other knives in the circle.
No other knives in the circle, right?
Levi's very particular. There can't be anything in the circle that's like
I don't bring plastic. I don't bring anything.
A paper towel.
Because it's not consecrated. It's not holy.
It's not okay. It's not okay.
Yeah, no thank you. But yeah, so
the Leviathan will rise up and get you.
It will, and the Leviathan is Levi, who will scream at you for having brought plastic into this holy space. If I see the word Sabra printed on anything in front of the divine gods, then you should be punished.
Oh, we haven't said this, but if you'd like to call in, we don't usually get callers. God, I don't even know. Don't we need our phone for calls, or does it come in on the computer?
It comes in through the magic box, Brian.
It does come in through the computer.
I believe so.
Oh, I don't remember. I felt like it was my phone lesson. Anyway, the number is 504-321-3472.
Always with the voice.
Call now, or you're going to die of cancer.
Don't say that. See, superstition, right? Now we have to.
Teasing. If you'd like to call in, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, post your questions in the chat. We love your participation because sometimes we run out of ideas.
And I will say this. There's a weird... Superstition can be dangerous. And and I can give some very strong examples of this. The anti-science movement right now around vaccines and other things like that. Superstitions can be dangerous. But one of the ways that I see superstition becoming very dangerous is we now know about mind over matter on some level is true.
It is.
Like, for example, the placebo effect is much more powerful in clinical trials than once believed. You can convince people that they are receiving a medicine that is helping them, and they will slowly get better, even if it's a sugar pill, in many cases, of course not all, but enough that it's statistically significant. So, with that in mind, I think we need to be mindful and conscious when we deal with superstitious beliefs now that we know that it can actually impact your life. Like, if you constantly believe that something could make you sick, and the mind has the ability to make that happen, then you're going to make yourself sick.
Yeah, there's, people dying of fear,
Exactly.
That does happen. Anyway, so superstitions, Levi, since you're from the Appalachian Mountains, what were some fun superstitions you grew up with?
Oh, God. We had a ton. We had all the classic ones that we've already went through. The broom thing, the salt thing, knock on wood, all of that.
Yeah, but there's got to be something weird.
There were other weird ones. The broom thing was a big one.
Put the frog in your pocket.
They used to do a horrible thing to get rid of warts where they would kill an animal. You had to kill an animal to take the warts. That was a big thing. Camphor and pennies, fresh new pennies.
No, what kind of animal did they kill?
It depends on where you were in Appalachia, but often it was a cat.
Oh, great.
Then
Did this happen in your family?
No. I did have Doc Rowland was in my family, and he was a witch, which meant he was the seventh born of a seventh born.
Yeah.
Oh, if you were born with a caul over your head, you were a witch. If you
what over your head?
A caul, the afterbirth. If the afterbirth was wrapped around your head when you were born, you're a witch.
Mom, did I have an afterbirth wrapped around? How
we
do you
also
know if
had,
that happened to you? What if we all had that? What if that's the real
You don't
thing?
all have it. We also had interesting ones about the bird in the house was a big one. Owls were bad luck where I was from. Hearing an owl during the daytime was horrifically bad luck. Itchy palms, like we mentioned before. Nose itching meant something. I can't remember what it was though. If your nose was itching, it meant something.
Jewish?
No. No. I can't remember. We do have a question from Joshua, though. I'll keep thinking on that, Brian, because I'm sure I can think of some weird ones. Joshua says, what do we think of the threefold Wiccan reed?
Well, I actually did write about that in my book. And of course, we are an initiatory tradition. So the very first thing I'm going to say is there's no such thing as the threefold Wiccan reed within our tradition. We don't usually even use the word Wiccan. That's something that was popularized by people who weren't initiated, and they heard about it and they made it into their own thing, and Llewellyn made it really popular. So it's a cosmopolitan idea that it exists. So it does exist now within the Park pagan community.
Yeah.
It's not something within our tradition. We do have a rule that's similar, but that's for initiates really to work with. It's not really doesn't have anything to do with karma.
No.
And it doesn't have anything to do with anyone who's not an initiate. It is something that applies to an initiate in a certain way. So I don't follow a threefold Wiccan law.
Can I make one addendum to that, though?
Sure.
There is this weird habit going online right now. Actually, Sarita D'Este actually just posted on Facebook a question where she said, in the 90s, or I think I don't know if she gave it a specific decade, so forgive me, Sarita, if I give it that, but she said it was all unverifiable personal knowledge, what's often called UPG, do what thou wilt, witchcraft, and she was talking about the genres, and she said, what do you think is the dominant thing going on now? And a bunch of people in the early parts of her comment said, oh, it's this love and light crowd and anti-cursing. And then I noticed something that I'm happy to see. It was just a freaking litany of people coming along and like with receipts to basically show that that's nonsense. Every book that comes out now, every blog post, every occult person who's in that limelight, all they talk about is cursing.
Yep.
All they talk about is, I got you in a coffin box, I got you in a bottle, here's how to get rid of your neighbors, here's some hot foot powder that I made in my backyard. Like, it is incessant right now.
And I also write about, I write about what's called the Wiccan reed in my book as well, which is, that is somewhat real. It's words of wisdom. It's a reed. It's not like the one 10 commandment of witchcraft as it's put in some books to be. However, I point out that, it doesn't just apply to magic, and I think it's a really good rule. Live your life, do what you want to do, try not to hurt people. I don't really want to know somebody who doesn't live like that, regardless of whether it's
the
with
opposite
magic
is
or a
cruelty,
gun.
guys.
So I kind of feel like, well, if you want to hang out with people who are horrible people, then poo-poo on that. I don't think cruelty, suffering makes you a badass. I think it makes you a bully. Or I think it shows the fact that you are actually a weak-willed individual who has no power in your life, and this is your way of acting out into the universe.
I think that's often the case.
Because most of the time, we all know that these things aren't doing anything to anybody.
No.
So,
and this takes me to another point that is a little complicated, which is sometimes people love to try to. There's a nasty one-up culture in the occult world right now, where it's a spectrum. So the worst of the worst, according to this sort of this judge it all mentality, are the pagans, right? The people who are neo-pagan or call themselves a Wicca or whatever, they're the worst of the worst. Above them are a little bit, they might look, say, like us BTW initiates. Well, at least we got something, right? Oh, we might have made it all up according to them, but we're something. Above us are the hardcore grimoire worshipping sort of Western occult people still holding on to some Golden Dawn dream that I don't think even exists anymore. And then above that are the darklings who go into cemeteries at night and rob for skulls and capture souls. And it's almost like the darker you can be, you win some sort of special award nowadays. But it brings me to a point that I don't like to bring up a lot because people get really angry when I say this. A very dear friend of ours got mutually angry with me recently over this, where I said, this person was talking about something they had seen done in a necromantic ritual with someone's soul. And I literally said, that's not true. And they went, and their response, of course, was, well, you haven't seen it. And I said, no, you misunderstand what I'm saying. I don't believe that that's what a soul is. Like that, the belief that your soul is a ghost in a machine, a special little thing that can be popped out and sucked into something else, to me is the epitome of some Ghostbusters nonsense. It's what an illiterate peasant in the 14th century would have believed.
You just plucked Ghostbusters out of my head.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't believe it. I don't believe
that's what a soul is.
No.
The soul is literally the isness of the divine within consciousness. Like this, it's just such a base understanding of the human body, the human soul, the purpose of life. Well, and
it comes down to my major philosophy about all things spiritual. You cannot expect someone to believe something you saw. You cannot expect someone to believe something you experienced. You can't. Mm-mm. So if they didn't see it, then they shouldn't believe in it.
No.
Just like,
exactly.
Just like, no, I'm not going to believe that, something happened unless I know it happened. Doesn't mean you think the person's a liar, but, once again, perception can play into that, of the situation, fear, drugs, delusion, who knows? Or what the soul is. Is the soul, did you have some sort of experience where, where you've seen, the goddess Tiamat? Did you really see the goddess Tiamat, or did you see the goddess Tiamat?
Yeah.
It's philosophy on some level.
And that's just what it goes back to what we spoke about, kind of tying this all together so that we have the cohesive message here is like, I don't want to speak for Brian, but I don't think Brian or myself believe that the soul is the human soul is this individual, like, minuscule thing. It's much bigger than
I believe it's more complicated, where I do separate with you a little bit, as I think that our consciousness lives on in a way.
Oh, I believe consciousness lives on. I don't think ego always does.
I'm not going to explain it right, and I always love to talk about the Egyptians, but the Egyptians believed that the soul was basically like 3 different things.
Yeah. And it depends on the system, sometimes more.
Yeah, well, they were 4,000 years, so it is hard to sort of pin them down. What people forget about something like that is it's a lot of different cults.
The Kabbalah does this.
And they had superstitious people too, everyone does. The great thing about superstitious people is they're easily controlled.
It's true.
So keep that in mind.
That is true. Yeah. But the Kabbalah does that too, the theory of multi-souls. Some souls, but there is always a part of the soul that is divine. I love an example of like just keeping a superstition alive for no reason, just for fun, is this person, Scotty, said they bought a house and they discovered that the former owner had placed pennies on the ledge above every doorway in the house, and so they left them there, and they're still there years later. It's like, why break the tradition? It doesn't, that's the kind of superstition I'm okay with.
When we dug up the backyard for our pool, there were hundreds and hundreds of bottles buried, and some of them were broken. They were different sizes, but some of them were plugged up. I don't know what the workers did with all of them, but there was a really big one that they said, we're going to just leave this one here. And it's still there. They, for some reason, they look like witches' bottles. I don't know what they really were. Maybe they were burying witches' bottles in New Orleans at one point in time, and that was a place to do it. I don't know. Maybe, who knows? Maybe, maybe it was just people drinking and it got buried somehow. I don't know. But you do run into these things. We do have little customs. I was taught when you visit Marie Laveau's grave that you give her 15 cents or 3 pennies. Is that really a thing? I don't know.
And superstitions are made and created and transmogrified over time all the time. But I think they're fun on one level. I just don't like.
It can be fun. Just don't make them. Don't make them your gods. It's not a system of magic. It's not the superstition is not a system of magic. Folklore is beautiful, and folklore exists. Folk magic exists in every culture that there is, especially if it's a deeply rooted. There's Irish folklore, there's Scottish folklore, there's Native American folklore, there's Italian folklore. There's absolutely folklore in New Orleans. Which is probably African American, Creole, French. That's probably everything. Who knows?
Everything, yeah.
Those are wonderful things, and there is magic, but they're not magical systems. And this is something some people will want to disagree with me because they're practicing folk magic, and so they've probably established a system, or maybe in some ways there are, but it's more like you do this, and this is how this spell works. that's not really a system of magic by our definition.
There's not a philosophy beneath it.
Yes,
Why
a
does
system
it work?
of magic is
Why
what's
does it
behind a really good priestess of mine was talking about Masonic rites that she goes to, and she's an occultist, and she so she wanted to know. She'd say, so why do you do this in the ritual? And they'd say, well, because that comes right after you do that. But why do that? Because it's the bit before this. She's like, they had no clue.
Yeah.
What she was trying to accomplish.
No.
She was trying to figure out
The why.
the mysticism behind it or whatever.
The why.
Not the, So, yeah, the same idea. A system of magic has nothing to do with lighting candles. It has nothing to do with applying oil. It has nothing to do with the magic words you say. The system of magic is the whys behind it.
Yeah, because you could...
And since all folklore has all those things in common, you could go to Africa right now, you could go to Ireland right now, and find living folklore traditions that are all doing the same thing.
Mechanically. But what's the why?
They don't have them anymore.
What's the why?
Yeah, Catholicism sort of does, because they at least have, in some African traditions sort of do, because they've got certain saints or whatever that apply to it. And so there's a belief system behind it. So you want love? Give offerings to Aphrodite. That's what they had the peasants do.
The Romans literally had a name for that system. They call it do et des. I give and
it's
you
a great
give.
way to get donations to your temple.
Yeah, quid pro quo.
Quid pro
quo.
Oh, did you have to use that?
That's what it means.
Now I'm just thinking about impeachment. Could we get some superstition about that, please?
Right?
Anyway, let's not
Joshua wants to know what we think about how this is portrayed in TV shows like Harry Potter, Vampire Diaries, Charmed, things that have witches and magic in them.
Depends on the show. I mean, if you look at Harry Potter, it's like they have training and a system of magic behind what they're doing. It's not, it's quite obvious you can not do it right. You can mess up. So it's got a system. I don't think it really, they use folklore and superstition in the stories. It's fun. Usually that's fantasy magic though. So I don't think it quite applies the same way. If you had a show where people were like, you have to do this or maybe some older shows about where paganism is coming into the story, that's there. But I think those shows are so fanciful. I mean, if you can throw a fireball out of your hand, what is superstition?
It's not superstition, honey. It's real. It's all real.
So I don't know if that really applies to the topic, but they definitely use folklore in creating those stories, and I think most of us find them fine. I don't really get upset too much about anything unless it's just really, I don't like it when witchcraft is gore, probably not then, but usually I don't have a problem with it.
No, I love pop culture witchcraft. Love it. Sabrina comes back the 24th.
But it's not real,
Super
It's just not real.
I don't even watch that much TV, and I'm still super excited. So we all have our, little guilty public pop. We did a whole show on pop culture and witchcraft.
We did. It was fun.
But I can't wait for that. But I think that what we just keep going back to the why. Why does it work? That's the whole thing. There's 4,000 videos out there on how to use a quartz crystal to do
grinding
something.
my brain about.
It's like why?
I didn't pre-do it. Usually, I have something planned. I can't really think of very many things that I would classify as superstition that we do.
Yeah.
Because there's not, I can't. I mean, I get that the general
academia
would, what do you mean? You're, running around the woods naked with a knife.
I mean, it's because it's Tuesday.
Yes, but, in the sense that how our mechanics are how we don't have like these sort of fear-based system. We don't have this, you have to do this or something bad will happen to you. We do have ritual etiquette and you don't break it, So I suppose that could be classified as superstition on some level.
It could be.
But it is a form of consciousness, like Levi's saying, because it all is you working out your own powers on the inner planes.
But I think it's all about worldview. I think some people have a worldview, and this has to do with like history and tradition and ethnicity and nationality and where you're raised and whatnot, and what religious traditions you're exposed to. I think some people view the world as a scary place full of monsters, and sometimes those monsters are real. It's a fight against an oppressive regime. When I think back,
orange imperialistic king.
I mean,
who wants to overthrow society.
You're not wrong. But like, for example, Haitian voodoo was incredibly important in the Haitian Revolution. Kimbanda right now in Brazil is used as a tool of, power against oppressive, inequalities and wealth and want in Brazil. You have this, in left-hand paths in India used as, sort of ways to break free from social constraints. So sometimes those acts do have meaning, and they're grounded in this world of the monsters are here and we're going to fight them with our own sort of relationship to the monsters. That's a little bit foreign, I think, to us, because I think in our religion, we're built more on the Western concepts of transcendence. You also find this in the East, of course, in Dharmic religion, but we very much are built into that system that had Neoplatonism as its foundation, that had Hermeticism, that had Kabbalah, that had this concept of, through these works, magic, theurgy, ritual, religion, worship, you are elevating the self to be something greater, right? That is transcendence. And some systems are not really going to care about that. They care more about, look, I got to put food on the table. I got to get rid of these people who are trying to ruin me. We're focused on something else. It doesn't mean one is better than the other.
A lot of folk Dark Ages was the imminent death and disease on a constant basis.
Religious
and they wanted
warfare,
something. I mean, we don't talk about it very much, but during the Black Plague, it wasn't just witchcraft. They thought vampires were running around Europe killing everyone because so many people were dying of this unexplained. It had to be the devil, or it had to be the end of the world. So a lot of it was born out of fear. And you do behave now.
Exactly. Yeah. That's another thing. Is like, I hope people realize that we can evolve. Spirituality should evolve. We give off the image of being arch traditionalists, but we also are big on evolution, and like spirituality should evolve, and it has. The same thing happened with Greek religion. Amongst the educated, they really weren't telling the same stories of Zeus having flings with other women or whatever.
The mystery cults were not
exactly. It became
the same as state religion. I think people get that confused in Greece, Rome, and Egypt, and I guess the Celts as well. I think what the Druids were teaching each other and doing
might have been a little bit different.
Might have been a little different than what the average Celt thought was going on. I mean, it's well known what we know about them, that they were definitely the ruling caste in a way.
Yeah.
So there had to have been a separateness of what they...
Yeah, they filled a lot of roles.
And that was the same way in all the mystery cults and the other cultures, is that what was going on with the priesthood, that was your academics, that was your highly educated people. They weren't the peasants or the rabble, I guess you could say. So what they offered them, depending on the culture, was something very different. And people, were typically okay with that. Not everybody... everyone watching this show right now obviously is very interested in magic and witchcraft and things like that. So you're not of the mindset, possibly not in the mindset of the average human being who just wants their life to be good, wants to have a good family, wants to, have a happy life. Our worldview is much different now, but for these people, the gods were firmly established for them as their worldview, and they wanted to keep the gods happy because they were real to them. But they weren't necessarily priests, they weren't necessarily initiates, they were not magicians. They were just like, hey,
But also, I will actually say that this idea that the ignorant of the old didn't have higher concepts is starting to be unraveled by a lot of academic work that's coming out. If you read some of the academic work on Greek and Roman religion right now, you'll realize, Egyptian too, that this idea that they were hard polytheist, which was true, that had no concept of transcendence or bigger picture, it's just not true. I mean, the fact that you have deities like Serapis in Alexandria, who is specifically
in a way, or duotheists at Eleusis, a high-end initiate Eleusis, you probably saw Demeter as every goddess.
Yes.
If you were an initiate of the Temple of Aphrodite, like a priest or a priestess in the Temple of Aphrodite somewhere, on Crete, let's say, you probably thought Aphrodite was God.
But we actually have first source
in
documents.
Athens, Athena was the thing.
But we have source documents that say this. You know what I mean? That specifically say prayers to the goddess. That'll be like, ye who are called. There's one by Isidorus in the 1st century that's carved onto a stele in Egypt that says to her.
Do you consider yourself a monotheist, a polytheist? What do you call yourself?
I think I could use all those terms in different settings, but I mean, I am a monotheist. I believe in one God, one source, but I wouldn't use the term monotheist. I'd probably say a monist, which is what a lot of Hindus, that their philosophy is, because I believe it's all one thing.
Duotheist is more of a modern term, isn't it?
Yeah, duotheism, I believe, is a lens.
Ultimately, I'm a monotheist because
Same.
I sort of believe in the one source, but I do see them as God and Goddess, so...
Yeah, but I'm using that as a lens, and my higher
and
self
we accept
knows
all
that.
the symbols, so we are Neoplatonists, really.
Yes.
That's, if you want to know what initiates basically believe, most educated initiates use that philosophy.
Sure.
That's where it comes from, and that's what we practice. It's very popular in the occult, really. And that is the idea.
Ooh.
All gods are one God.
Yes, and I would recommend some things, but this is perfect because Morgan asked a question. Any preferences on researching Diana, Isis, and Hecate?
My book, Initiation into Witchcraft.
Yes, start with Brian's book,
Cain.
absolutely. But here's what I'll tell you: that you picked 3 interesting ones because they're the 3 most conflated ones. Historically, they became multi-faced goddesses.
Yeah.
Yes, so I can recommend it real quick. A couple really good ones. Wits and Isis in the ancient world is amazing.
Ishtar doesn't get the credit that she deserves
it,
because she was also Astarte and Inanna. So, and I believe is connected to Isis in some sort of way. These were big. These were the big mamas. And in modern witchcraft, absolutely, Diana is one of the big mamas. Isis is. Going into the modern occult movement, Isis, which I'm a huge proponent of in my book, was the first goddess that was the primary goddess in the modern occult world. You'll find her within, she was huge in the Golden Dawn. She was even involved in Masonry on some level. So you find a lot of
everywhere.
that. MacGregor Matthews and his wife were convinced that she was going to be the new modern religion and tried to start a side cult.
I knew that one, yeah.
It's really not a big surprise that Mr. Crowley, who did he pick? Nuit, her mother. So there's this whole history, because he had to trump them. I'll pick the mom then, Diana, we know, Hecate, whatever you want to call it. She has become really big within the last 10 years.
I can make a big recommendation for her. The Chaldean oracles were, that is a text that most Neoplatonist philosophers literally thought was like a divine scripture. Proclus wrote the commentaries on it.
And Levi loves Magna Mater because he wants to cut his boys off.
That's not true. I love the cult of Magna Mater, but not because I want to be a eunuch. But she's another great one to look into too. But the Chaldean oracles...
I like the name.
Magna Mater, the Great Mother.
I like the name.
Which
that was in Bath, England, the mater.
Yes, she was.
Breedward mater.
The Matronium.
Brigid.
Another one.
Having been to Kildare, Kildare is just like Athens. It's not beautiful like
Saint
Athens,
Bridget everywhere,
but she is everywhere. And I think because she entered into Catholicism, and even some people say voodoo.
Oh yeah, Mama Brigitte.
Some people say they're connected. Some people say they're not.
Yeah.
I think they have to be.
But before I forget, the Hecate thing. In the Chaldean oracle, she's the supreme goddess. And this is the text that our philosophical forebears thought was the scripture, right? The supreme goddess is Hecate Sotera, Hecate our savior. And she's addressed in a very interesting prayer in the Greek magical papyri too, in her form as Selene, and then also as Hecate. There's a book by Sarah Ellis Johnston called Hecate in the Chaldean Oracle, or Hecate Sotera is what it's called, Soteira. Hecate Sotera. And if you really want to read about how the ancients could conflate goddesses and see them as one supreme being and a doorway through which you could achieve initiation and light, Hecate in the Chaldean oracles will give you that, as much as Isis will give it to you if you're studying Ptolemaic Egypt.
I think you read the book. I'm more of a proponent of the Roman Isis than I am. I know it comes from the Greeks.
The Ptolemaic Isis
but
is
it
my
got
favorite.
really, really big with the Romans. That's when she was the most worshipped was in the Roman Empire. Yep. But there's a book called, and I used it a lot in the research in my book, Isis in the Ancient World.
Wit, W-I-T-T.
Yes, has another title too. I can't remember what the other title is.
But they'll find it from that.
But it is, oh my God, if you read that book, it is a history book. It's not a practitioner's book, but the things that you learn about it, it's quite amazing. Mm-hmm. Or The Golden Ass is another good book.
Oh God, yes, Apuleius, even though it's a fictitious work, it's amazing. And it has a very interesting part about being initiated into the cult of Isis. And Graves, even though his translation might not be perfect, is still my favorite because it's so classic. And because he's Robert Graves and was massively influential on us. But yeah, there are lots of ways where you're going to see that image of the gods, because that to me is the difference between superstition and real practice, is realizing that I'm just going to flat out say something on here that I know a lot of people won't like, but in particular traditions. I mean, my fellow initiates won't care because this is what I've been trained in, but I do not see the gods as isolate intelligences that live in the universe. I do not believe there is some being somewhere wrapped up in a bubble of energy named Ares who's just in charge of war, who is separate from all other things, who was actually born. No. The gods are facets through which I see a supreme divinity, an Ein Sof Hour, an infinite light that is so difficult to comprehend that to have creation itself, it divides itself into the known and the unknown, the male, the female, to a polarity. And I work with that polarity to understand that divine in myself. What I don't believe, and this is why I think we don't get a lot of Asatru in our practice, is because they tend to be much more hard polytheists. I don't believe
not Nazis.
Well, valid. You know, I'm sorry to the people who aren't, but God, it's rough lately. But I don't believe there are literally people living on Mount Olympus who are special, who are super people, who are...
Except on the astral world, maybe.
Sure, but they're not literally on Olympus as separate individual entities that I can talk to. I just don't think it works that way. So Kat mentions, the collective consciousness. Yes, if you're a Jungian and that term works for you, absolutely. I don't use that language as much because it's just not my background, but sure.
The universe is vast. I think maybe in some place at some time they do exist, but I don't think it's like God on a throne up in heaven. I think that the universe is vast and existence is uncomprehendable, but ultimately my philosophy is, yes, it's the light of God coming out as a rainbow, and the way that God communicates or has communicated to us is through our innate gifts. So it's not really a surprise that comes out through art, creativity, and expression.
Absolutely.
Statues, the beautiful statues, and all the beautiful art that's come out of divine inspiration is this image that a human being was given in their mind, or manifested in their mind, and they were able to create that into the world for other people to see. I love that. I think it's beautiful. It's one of the things that I most enjoy, and I do think that in a sense is the voice of God.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I want to say this, and because we've gotten very heady here, which is usually where I love to be, but to bring it down.
But it is the opposite of the superstitious world.
To make it practical, though, because
we started with we knock on wood.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we're talking
Some
about.
people are very want to know, well, what's the practical side of this? Where I can tell you. Here's what I want to tell you. Look at people and what their practice does for them. So, if you notice people are driven by paranoia, fear, they're constantly cursing, endlessly making bottles, obsessing all the time. All they talk about is who they've got burning in the window because who's against them. Are they okay? Like, how's their life going? Are they building that light?
Paranoia is usually not a good sign.
It's not. Are they building a light? Are they their highest self? Are they
and if you want your man back,
greater?
he's not coming back.
Valid. Are they pining over somebody they shouldn't even pine over?
That's the most common.
Do they refuse to let go? Do they not accept cycles? Start asking yourself those questions before you follow them. And look at somebody who is doing greater inner work, who's challenging themselves, who lets go of toxic things when they need to, who embraces something even when it's difficult, who has a system of ethics, for God's sakes. See where that leads them. I promise you, in almost every case, the more banal and repetitive their superstitions are, the more wrecked their life will be. And it will be all they talk about. And that's just been my experience. What about you?
Yeah, being immersed into this world, I run shops, I have been a reader, you get exposed to, I've been exposed to all sides of humanity where it is involved in the craft. The inner court, the outer court, the customer, the client, the worker, the famous, the infamous, I've seen them all. And it's very easy, it's not about necessarily, don't want to word it wrong. Yes, manifestation. Let's just look at it there, manifestation. We come back a lot to look at somebody's life. A really, truly superstitious person usually does have a level of ignorance about them that extends beyond just these strange belief system that they've become obsessed with. Usually such an obsessive personality is going to be obsessed about other things, somebody who can have self-reflection and intellectualize their life, or have self-realization, I guess, usually they do have a better handle on their reality. So whether it's in or outside of the occult, I think the symptoms and the mechanics are the same. You know, people who tend to be really obsessive and superstitious tend to be very similar to people who have other kinds of dysfunctions.
Yeah.
You know, so
like attracts like.
You know, so I think that it just depends. Like all things in moderation, they say, right? Which is funny coming from me because I'm an extremely indulgent person. But I have to be very careful because I, like everything too much. And if I was myself completely fell to my indulgence, I would be a 500-pound hooker who worked out of the back of a bar.
We took it to a weird place, but you know what? I'm going to let the
but
analogy
thankfully
stand.
I'm not.
I'm going to let the analogy stand because it's accurate. So, wow. But no, so I think our host show, since we're getting near the end here, has really hit on the topics that matter to us. And we've had great questions and great comments. By the way, we see all your comments. Thank you so much for all the kind comments.
And Levi would be fat, and he would be
we're not
living in a library. You'd be in a library that does a used bookstore, 500 pounds.
Why is it gotta be
this? Is what I'm picturing you as.
Thank you.
If we were the worst versions of ourselves.
Oh, if I was the worst version of myself, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Oh, insufferable.
Neurotic, agoraphobic, librarian.
Librarian.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or used bookstore, I like that better.
Oh yeah, it would smell like weird, dusty books.
Have you been to that bookstore here where it could cave in?
Yes, I love it.
That would be where you are.
That bookstore. I go there all the time. Red flag. But yeah, that's the thing, is I think that the reason and I want to end on something very important for me, and then I'll let Brian wrap up too. I already know comments I'm going to get from some of the things I've said here, that I'm attacking certain traditions, or that I'm downplaying, I think.
We don't care.
Better. But I do care on one level. I do. I care that I'm understood correctly. I don't think it's less than to practice ancestor veneration. I don't think it's less than to practice traditional magical techniques and divinatory techniques. I don't think any of that is less than. It is different. Mm-hmm. And I think that you'll notice the people who are the most devout in those traditions, the initiates in Haitian voodoo, the initiates who've been practicing these religions for generations, the leaders from these groups, they have as much contempt for the people out on the street hawking their faith, to the paranoid and the illiterate, than we do. So, it is just as despised amongst them as well. So do not think I'm attacking anybody's particular path. What I'm attacking is a mentality, right, that exists in. I've met witches who think this way.
I think because me and Levi are both people who are exposed to the business side of witchcraft, we do see all kinds. And so sometimes you do cringe a little bit here and there. I'd say what I want to get across most with this show is that superstition is not occultism.
True.
And it has nothing to do with how an occultist approaches their worldview. I'm not inherently superstitious. I have a few superstitions. I think we all do. And as long as you keep them fun and take them with a pinch of salt, it's fine. I think studying folklore is fantastic. I've done folk spells. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. We're not really criticizing any beliefs. Ancestor worship comes up a lot. In my worldview, I don't want to be your damn ancestor. Same. If I die and I have to watch people's lives or listen to people's prayers or have hugs from grandchildren I don't know, I'm going to be really disappointed. I want to be flying through the astral world on a dragon, or making love with 10 guys who are now gods. I don't know anything else but living vicariously through your sad existence, or mine even. So I hope my ancestors are not available. This doesn't mean I don't honor my ancestors. My ancestors, they lived. And some of them were probably bad people who I wouldn't want to know. But they lived and they survived, and I'm a product of that. Mm-hmm. So, I respect that, but, they're not genies, they're dead people. So in my worldview, no, I'm not an ancestor worshiper. Does this mean I care if you are? No, I also don't worship Jesus, but I don't care if you do. I find Buddha a little bit unsettling sometimes, but I have nothing against Buddhists. You know, I had this conversation with somebody not long ago who was a little bit offended by my stance on animal sacrifice, that witches do not sacrifice animals. And I said, of course I don't believe in that. If I did, I'd be in your religion.
Exactly.
You know, there's nothing wrong with being in different religions. People make different choices of their religion because they believe different things. And
if we believed it, we would join.
So many things you can do now, even witchcraft. You know, there's so many different places you can go. It's not like we don't have options. You know, the occult world is like a giant Walmart right now.
You're not wrong. On that note, I would like to say, go home, throw salt over your shoulder, knock on wood, get itchy palms and money from it. But just remember, that's not.
And know if your ancestors are talking to you and sitting around that they're the lame ones, because the cool ones are doing better things.
The cool ones are flying dragons through the astral with Brian.
We will not dead
soon.
There were covens in Europe. That's what they're called. The congregation. Covens in Europe, in America, and in Australia, and they have one right here. That whole bunch. The parties with the singing and the flute and the chanting. Those are Espas or Sabbaths or whatever they're called.
Excited, huh?
Read what they do.